No, it's great to be here back at the Cotton Bowl, and certainly Rick Baker and everybody here does an amazing job. They do as good a job as anybody, quite honestly, of just the organization and what a great venue. So excited to be here 3 years in a row, and got in here last night, got organized, and looking forward to a great day of preparation. Hey, Dom.
Coach, Ken Capps from Football Writers Association of America. How do you think the loss to Indiana is going to impact your play? Or do you have extra incentive? Or what did you learn from that game that is going to impact your play on New Year's Eve?
Well, I just think, it all comes down to our mindset and our preparation. And, we've had a few weeks to go through and identify the things that we've done well during the regular season, and then the things that we need to do better in order to win this game, because that's the focus, is winning this game. That's it, nothing else. And so there's been things that we've done well, and then things that we don't do well. Now, there's always issues. So whether you win a game or lose a game, the issues are always there. When you lose a game, it certainly, as I say, rips open the scab and it allows you to dive into things a little bit deeper, which is exactly what we did. So, we certainly have used these last 3 weeks to get ourselves ready to play this game. And, there's a lot that goes with it, and I think we've had a good plan going into it. And so now we need another great day of preparation. And I feel like when you get into the playoffs, you have to, rebuild momentum. And that's exactly what we need to do here.
Coach Day, what is the biggest leadership lesson that you have learned from last December all the way to right now? And then secondly, how do you maintain such an elite culture here across the program?
Well, it always comes down to people. So when you're winning, I wouldn't say it's easy. Nothing's easy, but when you go through a setback or you go through adversity, that's when you really find out about people. You find out about the people that are around you. You find out about how tight your group is. And I think that it's been said before at Ohio State, you win with people and making sure that you have the right people around you. And that's just life. And there's life lessons to be had in everything that you do. And so I think that when you build a team, you want to make sure that you have guys that understand what you want to get done and understand that the team is more important than themselves. And in today's day and age, we all know that's not easy to do. But these guys are highly, highly competitive. They want to be the best in the world at what they do. And this is a group here that's chasing history. But they're also a very impressive group of young men. You get around these guys today, and you listen to them speak. You watch the way they handle themselves throughout the season, and that's everybody involved. And I say it all the time. It takes everybody. It takes our players, number one. It takes the staff. It takes the coaches. It takes our families. It takes everybody at Ohio State, and it takes all the fans. We need everybody to win this game. And so whether it's the fans that are in the stadium that are traveling here to Dallas, or those that are at home, our guys feel it. They feel it when they're at home, and they see the videos of people watching the game at restaurants and bars together celebrating, or pulling for us at home with their families as they watch the game. Like, all that stuff matters, and these guys know what they represent. And it's Ohio State. It's the state of Ohio. It's being a Buckeye. They take a lot of pride in that. And I think all those things are important when you're building a culture and you're recruiting people into the program, whether it's players or coaches. And they have to understand that when they come in. Like, you have to think big when you come to Ohio State. It's different for a lot of reasons. And embracing that on the front end allows us to continue to build the stability that's important here in college football now more than ever, in my opinion.
Coach, you've talked about routine
Thanks, brother.
and foundation being so important. Why are they important for you and your program?
Foundation? Yeah, I think when you get to this point of the season, you're going to go against really good coaches and really good players. So they're going to have really good schemes, and again, they're going to have really good talent. So when you get to this point of the season, what it's going to come down to is what you've built throughout the season, your fundamentals, the daily decisions to work at a high level, the walkthroughs, the meetings, the practices, the games, all those things add up, in my opinion, throughout the season. And that foundation, you find out how your foundation matches up against your opponent. And that's one of the messages that we have. You probably have heard about, how we give a brick to somebody each game after every practice, and then we put that brick over there on a pallet that represents the body of work that we've put in. And that allows us to play with confidence, knowing that we put that in every day. The competitiveness, the physicality that we practice with is something we believe in, that you're going to sink to the level you're training. And so all those things come into play in terms of our foundation and what we want to build to this point. And that's a message that we gave our players, this past week, is like everything you've been working towards is getting to the end of the season in the games like this is why you come to Ohio State, is to play in these games and to go win championships. And we have to focus on that right now. But here we are. And everything that we've been doing is building up to right now. So we have to be at our best. And that's the ask of everybody in the program, be at their best right now. Yep.
Make sure.
So, Pari, how you doing, man? Good. How's everything? Good. Yeah,
Hey, Coach Zay. Hey, just based on what you've seen on film, what's impressed you the most about what Miami does in the trenches, both in the offensive line and defensive line?
Well, they have very good players. Certainly, when you look at their length, their size, big and strong and powerful, and they've done a really good job of recruiting and adapting to, the new structure of college football. And, they do a good job of coaching them. And, you can see as the season's gone on, they've gotten better. And we know it's going to be a great challenge for, both sides of the football.
Pretty important player to your right, Ryan. And obviously he's meant a lot to Ohio State. But, I think back at the signing day ceremony where you kind of, did the fainting thing. And, now you're playing against a team that if they would have won that recruiting battle might have benefited even – Ohio State's been Ohio State. He might be the missing piece for Miami. What's it like having him on your sideline and – playing against Miami, a team that might have actually fainted if they got him? Is there any thought process of how one recruiting result can change the trajectory of a program?
I think about those things a lot, honestly. But I think it's all these little things that add up over time. It's never just one thing, in my opinion. It's all the little things that add up over time. But to watch Jeremiah work from the minute he stepped into our building to where he is right now, he's got a great spirit about him. He does, and he knows what he wants. Hates to lose, highly competitive. He's the type of guy that you just love to be around every day. He's a great teammate. Obviously, a great player. You see what's on the field, but it's the other parts that people don't see about him. He's very private and very disciplined in his approach. He knows, I think, anyways, sort of what a star he's become, and so he's done a very good job of creating discipline in his life and being organized and where he goes and what he does. He's very thoughtful about all those things. But he's just the kind of guy you want your children around. You want your teammates around. He's a really impressive young man, and just watch him work at practice every day. When you have your best players who work that hard in practice, boy, as a coach, it's like a dream come true. And that's the way it is with Jeremiah. And I know he's excited about playing in this game. He's excited about playing every game. That's just the way he is. I mean, he's so competitive that it could be a 7-on-7 on Wednesday. You're going to get that, but I know, certainly for him, going up against, Miami will be important for him. Is a lot of guys there that he grew up around, and he'll be at his best.
Follow up though, how different would this game be? This game specifically be if you put him on the other sideline?
Right. Who knows? I know you like to play the hypothetical game there, but I'm certainly glad he's on our side.
Coach, a two-part question. First, just how important, even in the age of how important in the age of like the transfer portal and everything changing, how important is it still to be recruiting South Florida heavily?
Very important. Yeah, they have tremendous talent, always have, and we want to do our part in that area. Brian's done a great job down there. Keenan Bailey's also from South Florida and Broward County. So, we have, pretty good representation here with Kenyatta and Brandon, certainly Jeremiah. And so, we want to have, some of the best players in the country at Ohio State. And we know South Florida has some of those players. And, I think for us, we're able to recruit nationally. And I think you've seen the guys who have come to Ohio State succeed and do well. And so, for players growing up in that area, especially having guys like Jeremiah do so well and seeing guys like Kenyatta do so well and seeing guys like Brandon have success, it allows them to recognize, okay, if I go to Ohio State from this area, I know that not only are there the guys in the locker room that are from the area that I can relate to, but I've seen it work before. So there's a blueprint there.
How much more difficult has it been to recruit South Florida since Mario Cristobal got to Miami? I mean, obviously you've won some of those battles, getting Jeremiah, getting Brandon Ennis. He's pulled, Mark Fletcher, Jordan Lyle. Just how much more difficult is it when you're kind of going up head-to-head with a guy who's known to be, a top-tier recruiter?
Yeah, I mean, the game has changed. It has. Recruiting is just very, very different than it was a couple years ago, and it's certainly very different than it was 5 to 10 years ago. So you have to adapt or you die. That's how it works in recruiting. And so, you have to be able to do that and figure out what is now leading to players making their decision ultimately. And there's a lot of different things that come into play nowadays. So, we're in the most competitive environment there is in the entire world. And, we're all figuring out ways to make sure that we're adapting to put our best, and to get, the best players on our team that fit our culture. And so it's all about talent acquisition, but it's changing every day, and we're all working towards making sure that we're ahead of the game.
Coach Adam Rosso with Spectrum News here in Texas. James Peoples probably hasn't had the year he envisioned from the beginning, but maybe what have you seen from him as far as the way he's handled the adversity and continues to kind of fight to get in the mix?
He's somebody who I think has gotten better, although maybe not everyone has seen it. He is getting better. His attitude has been excellent. I think he gives a burst to us, and saw a little hop in his step being back in Texas a little bit when he got off the plane, and I was happy for him. But he's done a good job, and I think he knows the areas that he needs to improve in. But he's getting better. He is, and he's not letting the fact that maybe there's a noise outside the building or things like that in terms of expectations get in the way of his daily approach, and that's a credit to who he is.
Ryan, you just said that recruiting has changed quite a bit in the last few years, obviously, so with all the rule changes.
Yep.
Back when you were the offensive coordinator and we were writing about Ohio State recruiting, it was very, this coach is a dog, this coach is really good. How much control do you feel like you even have anymore on the results of this thing, and how does being a good recruiter, how has that changed from your perspective?
Well, I think when you look back on recruiting when there was no NIL involved, I think that the stability of the program was important, like always. How you develop was important. Life after football was important. And then the relationship with the coaches was important. Certainly the facilities, location. I mean, there's a lot of things that came into play. When you've thrown this other part into it, It just, I guess, if there's a pie chart, now that's become a part of the pie. Now, depending on who the player is and how much that's important to them, and their marketability in the area, all the things that come into it, it just takes away from that pie chart is, I guess, the best way to look at it. Everything matters. Relationships still are the number one thing, in my opinion, and then everything else, kind of builds from there. I do think stability is critical, but when you throw the financial part of it in the NIL, whether it's retaining your roster, in the transfer portal or in recruiting, that just plays into it. So it does take a little bit of, I guess, away from the other parts of the things that we're talking about, like maybe location, where 20 years ago, maybe location was more important than it is now. I think if you do the studies on it, you probably see that there's just guys throughout the country that the nation's gotten smaller. They'll go wherever they need to go. You've seen guys jump from school to school because of these types of things. So I just think that it's a new world we live in. And then I think, all right, I remember a couple years ago, we were at the Big Ten Media Days, and I had mentioned, we may not recognize college football here in a few years if it continues to go where it's going. I mean, I think we recognize it. I think the product in the field is excellent, but off the field, it is wild. So as we sit here right now, like, where's it going to be in 3 years? Where's it going to be in 5 years? It's hard to wrap your mind around that because of how wild things are right now. So I do think there's a lot of change coming, and I think it's all for the better, just in terms of everybody getting a little more structure to this. The calendar, playoffs. I think we're all working towards making this better.
You have been a football guy since you played high school football. You're a coach, obviously, but do you feel like you are, because you mentioned that pie chart, and that pie chart changes per player and stuff. When it talks about financial decisions, who's worth what compensation, even assistant coaches leaving who are, viewed as that. Like, do you feel more like a CEO of a company now than you do a college football coach? And has your love or desire to do this altered as a result of the change?
No, because at the end of the day, it's still about players. But I do think, the job responsibilities has changed. There's no question. You're seeing, like, now, the structure of programs with general managers stepping in, having a bigger role, player personnel. You have, certainly, like in the NFL, you have your college, and then you have your pro scouting departments. Well, you kind of have your portal scouting departments, then you have your high school scouting department. So it is kind of trending a little bit more like the NFL, but the head coach in college is a little bit more like the guy running the whole organization. In the NFL, they're just coaching the football, and typically the GM is running the personnel part of it. In college football, you're the head of it all, along with your athletic director. And that's what's important to me at Ohio State is, having great alignment with President Carter, Ross Bjork, and then our program. Because if you don't have that, boy, that makes it very difficult. And we have stability right here. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to players. And that's why you get into coaching. I love the football part of it. There's no question. I love the X and O's. I love the scheme. I love the practice. I love the interaction with the players on the field. But that's just part of the role of what the head coach needs to play in today's day and age. But why do you get into coaching? It's to have an impact on players. That's it. And winning just allows us to continue to do that. So while you have to continue to adapt, I think that's the fun part of it. In terms of, trying to project what's next for us to give us an advantage, to make sure that we're ahead of the game and that we're leaders and that we're winning, is all part of it. So I like that challenge and surround yourself with great people, and then just watching the impact that these guys can have in the community down the road. That's what it's all about.
Do you like recruiting still?
Yeah, I do. I think it's, I say to our coaches all the time, their coordinators, and Mark, it's your job to recognize the talent, the physical skills. It's my job as a head coach to figure if it's a cultural fit for us, because there's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration these days. And like the question before about whether you go through a loss or you go through difficult times, or the portal opens up next week and everything that comes with all that. Like, you have to make sure that you're recruiting the right people, the right families into your program. And that's a big part of stability. So I do like that part of it. I think having a son who's going through it right now as a junior has allowed me a different perspective. And that's been helpful because I'm going through it as a dad. I sit there on the couch and listen to coaches talk about it. And that's been good. And one thing I've recognized is that almost all coaches sound the same when you get them into your building. But it always comes down to people. You know, when I go on a visit with my son, it's great to see the stadium. It's great to see the campus. It's great to see all those, you know. But at the end of the day, like, who am I going to turn my son over to? I've worked hard, just like all of these players' families have, of raising young men. And I've, worked hard to raise my son with Nina. It's like you're sending them to someone now. And that's a really big, important decision. And I think when you have a son, it gives you that recognition that, like, if your son decides to come in our program, I got his back, and we got his back. And as the head coach, whether he plays on a field or doesn't, and all the different obstacles that come during this 3 to 4 to 5 year process, we're going to be there to make sure he has what he needs. And it's not easy because we're expected to win every game, have a 3.0 GPA, do everything the right way. And so, we're going to challenge them to do things that they can't do on their own, see things they can't see on their own, hear things that they can't hear on their own. And that comes with some difficult times. But when at the end of the day that, you're surrounding yourself with people that are going to have your back and take care of them like your son, then it gives him a chance. And that's my responsibility as the head coach.
Coach Dave Fozzie Whitaker here with Sirius XM. I'm curious, in preparation for this game, obviously 3.5 weeks since the last time you all taken the field, how do you get that team to continue to play with the same fire that they did throughout the course of the regular season in preparation for this game?
Oh, man. Yeah, our guys are getting ready to, they're tired of going against each other. It's been chippy the last few days. I said the other day, we're tired of practicing against each other. They're barking at each other in practice, almost getting like the preseason again. So that's a good sign. That means we're ready to go hit somebody else. These guys are highly, highly motivated, and they know that sometimes the most difficult game is the first one in the playoff. And so that's been our focus is starting really fast in this game and playing for 60 minutes.
Coach, obviously you had some changes on the staff, which are positive indications of the health of the program, but how has that impacted the preparation for this game and how the day-to-day operations will be Wednesday night? Yeah, well,
I look at some of the programs over the years that certainly Ohio State was one of them when Urban Meyer was here, and I look at, when Coach Saban was at Alabama. When you're winning, there's opportunity for everybody. And I think that's the message we give our players is that, the number one goal for us is to win championships, to win games. And when that happens, good things happen, rewards and draft picks and their future. But it's the same thing for coaches. And when they have an opportunity to go on and further a career, that's a good thing. But you have to be able to adapt, like you said. So, while it's not ideal in terms of getting ready to play in the playoffs and having these types of changes, that's life, and you got to deal with it. So having a plan in place for that, making sure that, we have enough guys on staff that think like coordinators and that can do multiple things is important. I think that's part of putting a staff together. When you think about our guys on offense and some of the young guys that we have there, Carlos Lachlan, Tyler Bowen, Keenan Bailey, Billy Fessler, these guys are talented guys that can take on a lot. And so I give Brian a lot of credit. Brian's been amazing since he's been here over these last few weeks when he got back from South Florida. He's been locked in. I know that he's got to prepare for what's coming next with his new job, but when he's been here, he's been locked in, and that's been great. I know that the receivers appreciate that. The guys on offense appreciate that. I know the coaches appreciate that. But I think for me, because there's more time leading up to this game, I'm able to help more than maybe I can on a quick game week. So I think that's probably what puts us in the best position to be successful. And so it'll be everybody involved in the game plan, everybody involved with calling the plays, but ultimately I'll have the final decision on it. So that part's been good, and everybody's been locked in on that. And as these things come up, we'll adapt as we go. You got it. Yep.
Good morning, Coach. Anthony Yarrow from 305 Sports. Recruiting the South Florida, Miami-Dade County, Broward County area is a huge part of your program. Going up against a team that you face in a lot of recruiting battles, just, what does it say to South Florida recruits that obviously you guys are targeting and have targeted in the past? What type of game is this in the grand scheme?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of great players in South Florida, and there's a lot of guys that we're recruiting now that we want to get on our team, and I think you can see the blueprint of when you come to a place like Ohio State and what comes with it. I think when you come to Ohio State, you got to think big. You think about the guys that have come here and the success that they've had. You see the stage that we play on. You see the fan base. You see the, just everything that comes with the city of Columbus and playing in the Big Ten. And, it's a war every week. And most watched team in college football year in and year out. So it's a stage unlike any other, and I think recruits down in South Florida recognize that, and they also can see guys who have come from their hometown that have had success when they've been at Ohio State. So I think all that's great, and also guys in the locker room that think the same way they do, which is you got to think big, and Miami's a great school, and Florida's a great school, and Florida State's a great school. Ohio State, to me, is just a little bit different, and everybody has pluses and minuses, but when they get up to see what Columbus is all about, and they see what comes with being a Buckeye, you can see their eyes light up quickly, and right away whether it's the right fit or not. And we have a bunch of guys on the team that can that's testimony on that.
Malachi Tony was a guy that you guys obviously recruited, had interest in throughout his process. Did you think he was going to be the type of impact freshman that he's been?
Boy, he's had a tremendous year. I think when he was in 8th grade, he was close friends with Brandon Ennis, and he came up to visit us several times. And he's an impressive young man, and great to see him have success. And certainly, we'll be very fired up to play against him, and it'll be a competitive game. But it's just great to see somebody like that who's of high character doing so well. It's good for the game of college football, and happy for him and his success.
Hey, Ryan, sorry if there's any repeats that you've already had, but what do you remember from Caden McDonald's recruitment? He talked about, Larry really making him a priority, and how have you seen him kind of develop, not just as a player, but also with his confidence and mental strength and all that throughout the time he's been at Ohio State?
Well, I think, it started in recruiting. We saw a really talented fullback that we wanted to play defensive line, and he was very close with Mom, and I remember going there for the home visit and everything that came with it. I felt like that was still like recruiting. We were recruiting back then, and we saw something really special in Caden that we thought we could develop, and that's exactly what's happened. His first year on the scout team, he would terrorize our first offense, and we just knew it was in him. And I think that he's a great example of how our program over a couple of years has really developed him into being a great player and a great young man. He's fun to be around every day. He still hasn't played a whole bunch of football. I think it's just over 600 snaps. So he's still got a ton of growth ahead of him. I think his best football is still in his future, which is great. When you look at some of the guys last year, like I think maybe Tyleek and some of those guys were like in 1,500 snaps or north of that. You think about he's only played like 600 or so, and you see the impact he's had. It's a credit to him, and so again, proud of what he's done here in terms of his growth. He's a guy that we like to be around every day. He's got a smile on his face a lot in practice, but when he's on the field, he doesn't have a smile on his face. He's got that locked in, and I think he's become more serious. I think that's probably the thing you notice about this year more than anything going into the season. Just a different look in his eye. One thing to do it once or twice. Now he knows he's got to do it for an entire game, and just has that different look in his eyes, seriousness about him, and that's a big sign of maturity.
He talked too about kind of the jump he made this offseason, just about knowing he has to play not just with violence but do it every snap.
Right.
I think he said like no shortcuts is the word he used. When you look at a player's development like that, like how much of it sometimes is just him having the mental fortitude of knowing what it takes, and it's not so much necessarily just about coaching or fundamentals?
I think it's just immersing yourself in the program for a couple years, watching what happened last year, seeing those guys do it for an entire 16-game season, and what comes with that, and the expectation of a starter and what comes with that, and the production over and over again. And I think all of that has played into him taking the next step, and all of that in his game and his maturity, his experience, and his production.
Unrelated to that, sorry if you've already been asked, but what's your relationship like with Coach Whittingham, and what is your reaction to seeing him, kind of be on the other side of the rivalry now?
Yeah, we've been focused on this game really, but had the experience in the Rose Bowl, and that experience was great. He was a gentleman, and but we've just really been focused on this game right here and preparing for Miami.
Hey, Coach. It sounds like especially after the injuries last year, you sort of changed your approach in terms of limiting the number of snaps that your team was playing. Like even during the excuse me, during practice, but also during the season. Could you talk about, being mindful of how long the season can be with such a successful team and trying to manage that?
Yeah. Well, I think we all have the challenge right now on building a roster. That depth is harder and harder to build, and so a lot of that comes with how you practice. So we certainly have not backed down in terms of how we practice. But in terms of the game reps, that was a decision that we made, based on the style of play, because we knew we were preparing for a long season, and you can't go sign somebody off of waivers. So we felt like that was important to do, not in every game, but in most games. And so, and that's really on in all three phases. When you look at the number of snaps that we've had compared to other programs, we know health is very, very important. So that's a decision that we made, and then we were able to heal up over the last 3 weeks, which is great. So the idea is now to be at prime going into this game, playing really, really fast at our best football. So that's been the goal all along, in terms of our health, and do the best you can to put that plan together at the beginning of the season, and then you got to go execute it. So we'll see how it works out this season. We'll find out. I mean, it's all about right now, and that's the message to our team. Like, nothing matters unless you go win this game and you move forward. So that's the thing about playing this time of year for us at Ohio State. Like, you can do whatever you want, but you got to go win this game, and that's why we're all here. We're here to win this game right here. Coaches, players, everybody involved.
Hey, Coach. Mac Engel from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. I asked a lot of your players this, and I'll ask a coach this too, so you get the honor. If college football, for the sake of discussion, calls you and says, Ryan, we really need your help, this thing's a mess, what are the first two changes that you would make for the betterment of the sport? Not just your own, not just Ohio State football, but for the sport in general. What would you change to try to make a sizable difference, to sort of get some structure back to this?
Yeah, well, I think anytime when you ask coaches or players, I'm sure you got a whole list of things, right? Yeah, I'm sure. Because it's easy just to say one thing or another, but there's a ripple effect in everything that we do. Every decision that's made, there are unintended consequences and things that are going to happen. And I think the biggest challenge in college football, not the biggest, but one of the biggest challenges in college football is that, you take for example, the two teams that are playing this game, Miami and Ohio State, two extremely different programs. One is down in Miami, Florida. One is in Columbus, Ohio. The size of the schools, the conferences that they're in. Now you take a school like USC, you take a school like Tulsa, you take a program like Kansas State, then Washington. All these schools are coming from different parts of the country. They have different enrollments. They have public schools, private schools. There's a lot that goes into play. So when the people that are making the decisions at the end of the day come from the presidents and chancellors, from different, points of view and perspectives, that to me is one of the biggest challenges. So while I wouldn't say there's one thing that I would change in terms of like a rule or whatever, to me it's the overall structure of how it's all put together. And it starts to me with what I've said before. I feel like, however we organize it in terms of a conference, I feel like there needs to be, a governing head of it that can start with making decisions in short order. And I won't get into all that right now because I feel like, our focus needs to be on Miami and winning this game. But having not just one commissioner, but, having three, so there's some sort of checks and balances makes sense. But that's conversation for the offseason. Our focus is preparing today, having a really good walkthrough, really good meeting, really good practice, and winning this game. And then we'll dive back into that stuff in the offseason if anybody's willing to listen.